Hello, Mechwarriors, and welcome to the Mech Bay, where we fix your mech and fix your game. What's going on, Mechwarriors? I'm your host, Josh, and today I have my co-host, Denham, in the rumble seat. And riding as our lance mates today, we have Mike and Dan from the podcast Listening to Paint Dry on to talk to us about taking our Battletech miniature painting to a miniature art form. But first, we have some breaking news out of Iron Wind Metals. The HPG reads, Dear valued Iron Wind Metals customer, as you are no doubt all aware, prices have skyrocketed in the last year. The costs for the materials that Iron Wind uses have all risen dramatically, especially the cost of pewter, which is more than double what it was in December of 2020. Therefore, it is necessary for Iron Wind to do a price raise across all lines effective Saturday, April 16th, 2022. Thanks in advance for understanding and for your business. Sincerely, Michael No, President of Iron Wind Metals. Now, unfortunately, we don't know the exact rate increase, and I'd prefer not to speculate. All I can say is this is a great time to stop and get that summer requisition order into your CO, and then fill up that cart at Fortress Miniatures and Games or Ares Games and Miniatures. These two stores will be waiting to see the price jumps and then having to mark up their product according to their contracts. But as of right now, you'll be getting the normal discount locked in at the old prices until this Saturday. So head to Fortress Miniatures and Games or AresGamesandMiniatures.com to get the best bang for your C-bill. All right, now let's find out how to get that salvage painted like the rest of the lance. So let's talk about who you guys are. So you guys are listening to Paint Dry, and you're a miniature, I want to say art podcast. How would you guys describe yourselves and your history?
That's generous.
Oh,
very generous. I appreciate it. So, when Dan and I met a few years ago, well, probably what now? God, it's about 5-6 years ago.
Shit, Mike, it's probably longer than that at this point. Who knows? I lost track
Getting
of
old.
time. Yeah.
And we actually took a painting class together at a Nova Open. It was my starting to get back into painting. It was about 6 years ago. And then I only took that one class. And then the next year I took a bunch of classes, and it just actually happened that Dan was also in all of those classes as well. So we started talking a little bit. Yep. And so it kind of just progressed from there. And then in that time period, I am an avid podcast junkie, especially horror fiction and comedy. I can listen. I probably already listened to 15 episodes of podcasts today doing other stuff around the house and such. And so I was like, well, there's all these gaming podcasts, and I don't really game. I wanted to do something with the artists that were out there. And then we kind of face that challenge of how do you have a podcast about a visual medium, right? You have an audio podcast about seeing things. And so I kind of came up with this idea and bounced it off Dan, and he's like, oh yeah, it sounds interesting. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And he's like, wait, what? Like, wait, who, me?
I know. And so since I've been trying to get out of it, but he won't let me go.
Nope, not at all. He's stuck for life. But so that's kind of how it just kind of evolved. There was no, there were podcasts that did gaming that kind of touched on painting, and I wanted a kind of a really good excuse to talk to all these amazing artists under the guise of calling it a podcast and picking their brains. And so, it was kind of the way it kind of how it evolved. And, we went through whole slews of different, like we had formats and all these, like, we're going to do this. We're going to, where each episode we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And yet that has yet to happen in 2 years now, almost 50 episodes. Yeah, I don't think we followed a format ever.
Yeah, we try. It just doesn't seem to work. Oh. And one of the reasons you'll notice sometimes we have about an hour-long episode, and that comes off of the premise of, like, you can continue to improve. You got to get the practice in, which I'm sure we'll talk at some point. But usually it makes people... We find that 1 hour a day is really that, like, happy medium, even if it's mixing your paint or just doing a highlight or doing a couple lines or something. Not those kind of lines. That's fun too. That lasts more than an hour.
Clarify.
And it gives you that 1 hour time frame where you can listen to something while you're painting. And if you go beyond that, maybe there's other podcasts out there, or TV shows or whatever. But this is just to give that 1 hour basic amount of time where you can sit down, and we're not a video, so that takes you away from staring at the screen when you should be staring at your figures while you're painting it. And that's where kind of our focus is also. And we think that's why this is kind of a neat medium to try this. You're driving, you're going to work. If you have that 45-minute, half an hour commute, you can put in an episode every once in a while and listen to most of it. So that's why we try to go for about that 1 hour and try to communicate about, hey, what's going on in the hobby world. If you really want to see how a technique goes, you might watch a 5-minute video online. But we're trying there just to, take up some of that brain space to, get you through your hour of painting or commuting or just, riding a bike or whatever else you're doing.
Yeah, we appreciate it because that's exactly what I use it for, is when I'm painting. I want to listen to something. I don't want to have to watch something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it just keeps me focused on the hobby, low key. Yeah. I love it.
And, one of the things I've really loved about it is that while every artist we have on there, their story is different, their struggles and their path forward are really the same. And they so artists that are listening, that are new at it, can hear how somebody like an Alfonso Heraldez Banshee or a Roman Laplante, who are considered masters of the art of miniature painting, also deal with the same type of struggles that they do. And so that they're not alone, even though they see these amazing artwork, and it's hard to not get kind of overwhelmed and shell-shocked by it and be like, I can never do that. But at least they can see and use it as inspiration, because they know the work that those guys put into it, that those artists practice, and it's been years in the making. I mean, Roman, for God's sake, went to college to teach art, and so he's definitely got the educational background behind him. And so it's nice to be able to kind of give that back to the community, especially in the context that the community has been so good and open and welcoming to us. And so it's a nice little thing to be able to give back.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, well, it's like me. Like, I've got hundreds of mechs, and I paint as many as I can. But I go with the arm's length rule, where if they look good at arm's length, that's good enough for me. Except I've got some favorite mechs, like really favorite mechs. And those are the guys that I want to know how to bring that paint job up to the next level. So out of the hundreds of mechs, I might have 5 that I want to do not just a good job, but a perfect job. And your podcast seems to be helping out a lot with that.
Hey, well, that's cool.
Well, yeah, thank you. And that's one of the things that's interesting. One of the things that they kind of teach you, that when you take a class, et cetera, like in maybe a larger scale 75 millimeter figure or something like that, they actually get you to stop painting like for being up close. They kind of do like a halfway between arm's length, and that is where you want to kind of be idealistically, because I know that this is probably not the case in Battletech where it is now as far as painting goes, but kind of it's switching a little bit to where you're seeing brushstrokes on pieces, but the brushstroke was put there in a certain place on purpose, and so it's a brushstroke designed to move your eye, etc. Like a great example in regular art world is Van Gogh. I mean, everything Van Gogh did, all of his brushstrokes were purposeful and had motion, and you're starting to see that transpire more and more, especially in the larger 54 or 75, 120 millimeter figures. Those things are starting to kind of pop out. In the world of Battletech, yeah, that's an interesting one, because your scale is so much smaller.
Yeah.
And that's really, I have not painted a Battletech figure, but I think I'm going to need to steal one of Dan's and paint one.
I'll let you have one. So yeah. I guess I think Mike is right. When we play Battletech, or even that other game, we're always picking figures up and at that distance. So we do have those 2 and 3 distances. Mike does mostly the detailed work and display work. I do tabletop more because, well, I suck at regular painting. So you're trying to make your figures pop while they're on the table. And that's why we always say, hey, that 3-foot distance, because, that's how far away you are. And when you're talking about like your commanders, or you went to for special pieces, then that's when we will try to enhance those or make those much better quality paint jobs, because someone sees, oh, that's your commander, or that's your force leader or something, or your general or your special character. They want to see it, and they automatically bring it to their face, even though they're not thinking about it. That's why you have centerpiece and other game systems, because that's the champion or the leader, and people always gravitate to that because they're more dynamic poses, they're bigger, beefier. You better, those are the ones that we want to highlight a little bit more than the regular stand around. And it saves on time. With some games, when you have, 50 to 100 pieces, you got to cut that down, especially if the meta changes from week to week, where we can spend a little bit more time on Battletech, because meta doesn't change over 20, 30 years. So.
Yeah. And they do have, like, with the Kickstarter, they released the hero mechs, which are, the same mechs, but in different poses. So you've got, Grayson Carlisle's specific Marauder, or Natasha Kerensky's Direwolf. Yeah. So if you have a bunch of Marauders, but that one in the middle is a different pose, he's got to look better. He just has to.
Yeah.
But I have to put the note that Dan has definitely messaged me on a 2.5-hour episode. Are you trying to kill your people who are painting while you're listening? And I was like,
no, but you think about it. Once you get into that groove, you don't want to stop. So
that's true. That's true. Because, I was thinking, you take your half hour of painting and your podcast lasts all week. But it's right, because once you get into that zone, then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, it's been 2 hours. A, I'm late. B, I don't have any more podcasts for the rest of the week.
I mean, there are definitely different episodes like that, because I know, like with Banshee on, I asked like 4 questions and he spoke for 2 hours, and so, which was great. That was a fantastic interview, because I didn't have to do any work, and people didn't want to hear me anyways; they wanted to hear him. So
yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of us.
Yeah. We talk a lot.
But yes, throughout all of your episodes, you really kind of relate miniature art to contemporary art. Like, it is just as valid in the art scene with all your interviews with the artists. And through all those interviews, I'd like to think you've soaked up what I would term the hottest mini painting secrets, and like the secrets of the masters, because you are talking to the masters.
Oh, yeah. Do you want me to handle this one, Dan, or you want this one?
I have an answer, but I want you to use your words, and then
use my words.
Yeah, I'll only have 3 words, but go ahead.
I think there are definitely some very, very common themes that come across from each of the artists that we've had on. Probably the first one is patience, and being absolutely patient with yourself, and you're your own worst critic, and you have to be able to take a step back and enjoy the process, and don't ever let the process get in the way of it being fun. Because if it's not fun, then you're not going to produce good miniatures. I think another kind of common theme is practice. That these guys these guys paint, guys and gals paint 8 to 10 hours a day. And it's just ridiculous to me that somebody could paint that much. But, like, was it Vince Venturello paints 45 hours a week plus? And I'm like, how are you married and have a job, right? That's not miniature painting. But hey, good on him. That's awesome. So it's a matter of practice. Patience and practice are really kind of the key. Those are kind of the 2, I wouldn't say they're big secrets, but they're kind of impediments. Because most of the time, painters are getting in their own way, as opposed to hearing what they like, actually seeing what they're doing. And there's an old adage my wife told me about editing, that after you've proofread something 3 times, you start reading it from memory. And so you're not actually necessarily reading the words that you wrote, but you're reading from your memory. And so,
because where you messed up, you can't help but look where you messed up on a mini, whereas nobody else would even notice that.
Right. Absolutely. I'm curious about Dan's 3 words now, though.
It's about practice. As much as we want to get around the practicing part, that is, I feel, the key. There's a little bit of talent, very little bit of talent when it comes to painting figures or any kind of art or hobby that you do. You gotta practice, and it sucks. And getting through the ugly phases, it sucks. But once you get through it and something like sparks, like you get your aha moment on it, you grow exponentially at that point. You're like, holy cow, I just did something I didn't think I was going to. Let me see if I can do that again. Then it's not a game. It's not a chore, but now you're learning and you're growing. And that's why this practicing is so important. And yes, we want to be able to go to our favorite artist, look at what they do and replicate that the first time. But we don't know how many layers of paint, what techniques they're using unless you're watching their video. But even then, it's fast forward or they're skipping a couple things. What colors are they using? That's why we always like looking at recipes. What recipes did you use? Oh, I used a red. I used a dark red and I used a light red. Well, there's 50 shades in there. Well, figure out how to use them all. I mean, it's practice. You go in there and you do it and you do it again and you do it again. And hey, you know what? I could use the same 5 or 6 figures all the time because I'm the kind of person who, if I'm not happy with a paint job or if I don't, and it's a bad thing, technique to use. But I do strip my figures if it's like a figure that I don't particularly like the color scheme that I'm using. I'll go ahead and just strip them and start all over again. And no, Mike, I'm not stripping my models because that's a different podcast.
No, I was going to make a joke about you visiting Lake Green stuff or Simple Green, constantly where you dip your models in.
It's like, hey, guess what? Yeah, because I'm painting a yellow figure right now, and I realized that it was supposed to be more of a gold color. So before I knew it, I didn't have my recipe written down, like what I was going to be using. I didn't have my techniques. I didn't have my limiters or my palette set up properly. And before I knew it, a 2-color yellow turned into 6 different colors of yellow. And then I had oranges in there and browns. I'm like, no, I messed this up because I didn't control and think about what I was doing. So yes, that is going into the drink until I can clean it off, and I'll go find another figure somewhere and I'll go ahead and repaint that one, starting with the proper yellow and making sure that I stay within my recipe and make sure I'm not just doing whatever. So
it's good on you for recognizing that it was time to stop, because that's something I struggle with. It's like I will just keep fighting uphill, taking massive losses until like it's done. And I can call it okay. It's not what I wanted, but it's okay, and it's over.
Like a giant rubber band ball. It's got so much paint on it.
I think like some colors you can I think you can do that with, but yellow, I mean, I got like the lemon yellow to golden yellow to this weird looking ochre yellow, and I have everything in between, and then it just looks like a little baby crapped all over it. It just.
Was that secret weapon?
That secret weapon's baby poo, right?
Baby poo miniature wash, yeah. One thing, if you don't mind me adding, is I think one of the things I learned, I'm ignoring Dan. I feel like as miniature painters, we often ask ourselves stupid questions. Like we ask the question, does this Space Marine look realistic? Does this elf look realistic? Does this dwarf look, and we ask if if this is a perfect blend, etc. And the realization is Space Marines don't exist. They're not real. There's no perfect blends in nature. Even if you look at a flower and you see that it's got a gradient from white to pink, you could see splotches of where it is just a cutoff line. And so we get hung up on perfection and realism when, again, getting in our own way of actually painting good miniatures. Just like I'll ask the question, what does a BattleTech mech look like in real life? The one that's down the street from me is, I'm just kidding.
Hold on, I'll be right over.
Right, exactly. You want an address? All right.
Actually, that kind of, I don't want to parlay this conversation, but this is a little bit what you guys were talking about last week with hobby progression and that sort. And you can't get sidetracked very easily by asking those kind of questions. Like, what am I searching for? And if you keep searching for something, actually, that's probably not correct. If you're trying to make something perfect, in your painting, it becomes more of a chore and it's less of a hobby. It's less fun. And then you start to associate the non-fun part with it. And then you're like, why am I doing this? It's supposed to be a stress reliever. It's not supposed to create stress. It's supposed to be something you're supposed to be proud of, not something you're upset about. And that's where we get trapped sometimes. And that's that mental block, or that getting your own way. And you have to get through that, or not even ask yourself those questions. Just have fun with it. You're not, unless you're at a certain level, but you've had the time to develop those defense mechanisms for that. Like, hey, I know this blend needs to be perfect, but I've done this blend 5,000 times. I know how to do this blend without thinking about it. So that's not going to be something that's going to stress me out. Then you can start to pick and prod at your figures. But we're a bunch of people. We're gamers. Well, on our level over here, Mike is a display guy, but we're gamers mostly. So we just want good looking figures on our table and have fun with them. We want to play the game. So they don't have to be works of art. It'd be nice to have them there, but they don't necessarily need to be there. And if that starts to hamper how we're painting and how we're playing and how we're using up our hobby time, maybe we should, just take a step back and take a deep breath and do some lines.
I, for one, don't want all of my miniatures being museum pieces, because then the Indiana Jones, it belongs in a museum will kick in. It's like, I can't take my favorite mech out on the table. It could get chipped or scratched or something.
Yes. And actually that's a good thing to bring up. When we have big art shows, they're not normally gaming pieces. Right. They're a display piece. People don't want to put those. Like, oh, I can't put that out there. Someone might scratch it. Someone might drop it. It might break. Very rarely do we actually see pieces that are game pieces. Like, hey, hold on. Can I take the guy back out of the case so I can go play with him for a little bit and I'll bring him back? I mean, that's pretty balls to the wall, but it doesn't happen very much. Not where we're at right now, I think, with the art and the hobby. And how big tabletop games is at this point.
Yeah, because I'm the demo guy over at our store, so I'm expected to bring enough supplies for people who are new and don't have any themselves. And we were told people will be playing with your mechs. Bring the ones, you paint them. We want them painted, but you have to understand that they're going to get dropped, they're going to get chewed on, they're going to get stepped on. Things will happen. It will be bad. If you have favorite mechs that you really like, don't bring those.
Yeah. And don't let me touch them. I'll break them. I break everything I paint.
Chewing on minis apparently is a thing at conventions that people do, which boggles my mind, because I started playing back in the day when it was lead minis with lead-based paint.
Like real lead.
They're so sweet, though. If you've never chewed on a lead miniature, it's like candy.
This is why I don't bring them near Josh.
Warning, don't ingest miniatures.
But yeah, so I've got, like I said, I got my favorites that I want to be works of art, but those aren't the ones that I'll be bringing just to the table for people to play with. Those are my arm's length. They're good enough minis.
Exactly. And if you have one, hey, it's your commander or your champion, and you make it too good, you're like, whoa, do you get into that realm where you're like, hey, you know what? Maybe I just need to put it in a case. Then it just sits in a case, and your Mechwarriors like, hey, what the hell's going on, man? I want to go through and stomp some heads, but you got me locked in this big freaking glass case. Got to get out of here. So I get it, and it's that, it's that transition. I think when you're a gamer and you start, getting better and better at painting, and then slowly some of your pieces start to migrate over to display pieces. And you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? And that's cool if your hobby journey is transitioning into that's where I'm at. Mike was definitely that, because he started out with gaming and then transitioned to pieces itself, or display pieces. I'm like in the middle of the transition. I don't mind a display piece here and there, but I'd rather just go play games if I can. I like having large armies to command my willpower, and if I feel like destroying them all, then yay. Or they usually fail anyway. But
you referenced our last episode, and when my motivation is people to see the stuff that my progress and the awesome things. And if I can't bring it out and play with it, what did I paint this thing for if I can't play with it on the table? But I don't want you to play with it. I want to play with it. You can play with any of these, but this one I'm playing with.
So originally I had gotten back into the hobby because my son found my box of Space Marines, and I was like, oh, I remembered, I did this for about a year in high school when it was called Rogue Trader. And I really enjoyed it. And so I got back in, try to get back into gaming, but with 3 young kids, and I was in school, I was getting my master's, I wasn't getting a chance to even play until midnight. And so I just kind of painted for a little bit. And then when my dad passed, I was kind of stuck at his house by myself, working and putting things together and trying to get everything ready to move. And that's when I kind of really got into painting. And then I went to the Nova Open right after that, and it was all it's all downhill from there about painting. I was kind of I saw the display cases and went, ooh, I want to do that. So I was a wannabe gamer. I don't want to discredit other gamers by actually saying I was a gamer. I think I played maybe 3 games of 40K and 2 games of Age of Sigmar. So there we go. That's you now have my gaming experience.
It counts. You played.
Yeah. You've rolled dice.
Yeah, that's right.
Even though the 2 games of Age of Sigmar were demos at Games Workshop.
Oh my gosh, can we stop talking about Games Workshop? They get enough press.
That's fine. I don't mind.
Nobody knows they actually sponsor this whole thing.
Yeah. This
no, Josh, you sponsoring them is not the same. You buy enough of their stuff. You've put how many of their kids through college?
Really.
No crap.
Yeah.
Oh, Dan's not one. Dan has got no, when he says armies, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. I enjoy collecting my armies. Most of them are gray, gray or black, but,
hey, I've seen your, was it your Filt Belt?
Yes.
Guys.
A little splash of orange.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I had something written down. I didn't bring it. I was like, for you 1 or 2 people that don't know who they are, the Filt Velt Coalition are a bunch of farmers. And so I was thinking today, I was like, isn't that kind of funny? Everybody's like, who would go to a world with just all farmers and get their asses kicked? And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Yeah. So there's my zing for the month. So.
Oh, was it? My joke was going to be for Dan that, you beat Dustin, and that's why you're over here on our turf recording.
No, didn't he beat me by a point or something?
It was a tie when it came to actual game score, if I remember right.
And I think if it's right, it was supposed to be lava, and we said it was just going to be water instead. And then and then he parked all his mechs and got all the freaking heat bonus. I was like, oh man. I was like, hey, I totally forgot about cooling your heat on this. Yeah, as he decided to just process into destroying half of my mechs, but that's all right. That was a fun game. Oh, they were all fun. Jeez, I had a blast doing all of them.
Yeah, I remember all the text I was getting from him about how much of a good time he was having down in North Carolina.
I had a blast, man. I think one part of it was getting out for the first time in a long time, but you know what? Everybody was there was pretty darn cool. Everybody was just happy,
BattleTech players
friendly.
Are real chill,
and they are.
Yeah, compared to the rest of the communities, I would say that they are pretty darn chill.
Yes, and that is true. It is a completely different world, and it's a good world that I don't mind being involved with. And then once you start whispering in someone's ear, they all are creeping out of the closets, and they're that's probably a really horrible thing to say.
I'm not even coming
out of the woodwork. Well, I go to one tournament, and before I know it, there's 40 players in my area. I'm like, where'd y'all all come from? I didn't know all you people are around here, and they just keep coming out. All right, what other questions you got? Let's go down this journey, man. There's lots of cool stuff we can talk about with painting and BattleTech and other company stuff.
I'm only speaking in terms of BattleTech from now on.
There we go. So before we
Yes,
get to the iceberg, because like I said, the iceberg was what broke me as a painter. Like felt called out. I was like, so like I said, you guys mainly work in the upscaled.
Upscale? We're not like Macy's.
Well,
we're more like Kohl's of.
I was going to say Kmart.
Yeah.
Dollar store, maybe.
Dollar store painting.
Right.
Come get your paint supplies from Dan and Mike.
If it wasn't for the dollar store, I wouldn't have any basing material.
Well, you know what? I bet someone will bring something up about basing because Battletech's got some interesting basing that you can do.
My goodness, Josh's wife does the best basing on his mechs I've ever seen.
I do the basing. She does the painting, sir. How dare you? My basing is award-winning. My paint schemes are passable.
They look good either way.
But so, like I said, when you're painting battle mechs, the biggest one is 3 inches. Like they are tiny, but the other issue is we have mixed media, we have plastic, we have metal, we have lead, just due to the 20 to 30-year-old age. So I find it's very hard to keep a consistent paint technique and scheme, especially when I'm trying not to go for like showpiece quality, but like high level tabletop, like for maybe a painting competition at a tournament or something. Like, do you have any different approaches when you handle something like that?
Yes, the bottom line is yes. There are different approaches. I'm trying to think of a good example of using iron winds compared to the plastics. Yeah,
because like even a relatively newer Iron Winds mech has like it's still metal. It has flat spaces. Some places they want you to put a big decal there, but it's like okay, it's practically a square. Like I'm painting a box with legs, and I'm like,
well, we can get into a technique with that. That's. I think we have a good answer with that one. I think the big part is prep. The metal figures, every single one of us know they suck, especially us. That's all we had when we first started back in the 80s was all the lead, and you're using different materials to get them ready. But if you look at some of the figures that were made back then and look at their paint jobs, and we know that they're different techniques nowadays, there's a little bit more, I guess, importance on those techniques nowadays compared and more traditional techniques compared to just gamers like we used to be. And you'll notice, hey, you can see those mold lines, you can see gashes in the metal. Some of the premium ones, they'll do a good sanding job on it with files. They'll probably put putty or something in them to make sure that they're smooth. That used to be a thing a long time ago was, what was that stuff called? It was kind of like green stuff, but it wasn't, or milliput. And you would make it like a paste, a really, really thin paste, watered down like 50.
Yeah. I've got some of that stuff over on my desk. It's white, and
and you would put it all over your figures. And what would happen is it makes this like plasticky shell. So if you sand it, you get rid of all the little nicks and dings in it, and it makes a little smoother canvas for you to paint on. So for prepping for metals, yes. Plastics is a little easier. You get rid of a couple mold lines. You can use the back of a scalpel or a X-Acto blade, or just sand it off. But once you're done with that, I don't think there's much difference. A good base prime, and you can go with it. That's the only real difference. The physical manipulation of the figures, and that's it. Painting's gonna be the same. We're gonna use the same techniques, use the same kind of paints, same color paints, and go from there. It's not much different. It's just putting it together. So basically, yes, that's what it is.
Hey Dan, let me throw something in really quickly there too before you go on to the painting side of it. One of the issues sometimes with those when you go from plastic to metal to resin is that they're all going to have a different surface texture. And so metal often is pitted because of the talcum powder that they use to keep it inside the mold. So you kind of get that like burnishy looking powdery surface on it. That's showing you that it has pits in it. Resin is porous. And so it's one of the reasons why we prime resin, is because we want to make sure it doesn't absorb the paint or cause damage. And then of course, plastic is an ideal medium, but it's got its own limitations as well. I have a few, and this is something that was, I wanted to try it. I kind of accidentally found out what the Gundam people have known for generations is that the Mr. Hobby surfacer primers are sheer perfection. I had a piece that I did for ReaperCon last year where the piece was kind of like a half human, half giant. And just as I was cleaning it up and going, oh my God, I love this model, but the surfaces are too pitted. And I kind of researched online anything to do about it. I hit it with 2 coats of the Surfacer 1200, and it was as smooth as plastic.
Wow.
And I was like, this has just changed my life. And so when you're using something that, like, if you're doing a model that's multiple, like I have a few that are like resin with metal conversions, something like a Mr. Surfacer could be a game changer. And we're not sponsored by them at all, but I if they're listening, hell yeah, send me some cans. I love that stuff, man. That's all I prime with now. That's what I prime. Like I don't even use airbrush primer anymore. I just use the can. I went from starting with Rust-Oleum to now I'm back to cans again. But
so yeah, because the Kickstarter a lot of people got the dropship, which is just like you said, it's the resin with metal bits that you glue on there. So it's the different surface, different materials. So I was wondering what I was going to do about that. I think I'll try that. I think I'll try the Surfacer. Oh,
it's so good. And I started out with the 1200 gray, and now I've gotten like the 1200 black and 1500 black. You know, and the higher the number, the finer it is. So if you go lower, it's thicker. I know people I know Gundam builders, you also use like 100 and 500 to fill gaps as well. So apparently it's that, I guess but it's probably going to give us cancer, but it's really worth it for the nice smooth models.
I've made it this long,
Yeah, right. And and Josh has been chewing lead, so he's day to day at this point, right?
Oh, the horror stories from working with chemicals, I could tell. But
I'm pretty sure the chameleon I gave you the other day, Josh, was not lead.
I checked. I was actually a little worried. I was like, the coloring on this packaging is a little suspect.
Yeah, it was old. It's an old one, but I think it's still that Rhodium or something.
Yeah, it told us on there it was lead free.
Yeah.
Well, I did a Kickstarter a couple years ago. The Custodes dancers, Mike, and they were metal. So if they still do it, I mean, it's still easy to do. It's fast. It's cheap. It's probably the best way to get it going. Obviously, we want to expand, past fine cast and resin and get into some good plastics. But
it's a crime that Dan has not painted those yet.
I know they're there, but every time I look at them, I'm like, man, dude, do I really want to do all that flesh?
They're Space Marines in thongs. It's hilarious.
So if you want to be knocking GW, that's how you do it.
Pixar didn't happen.
Exactly.
So, Josh had mentioned basing. Like the only thing I know about basing is that you can't use like static grass right out of the package for battle mechs because they're too big. It's not grass.
I hate the static grass people. I'm sorry. You throw static grass on and it could be a perfect paint job. And honestly, I see a lot of great painted battle mechs, and like it's the regular single microfiber flocking, and I'm like, how dare you?
Oh, come on, Josh. Thanks. Because I do have some on there, but I try and make it look like bushes, not like grass. I try and make it look like shrubberies or hedges, something tall. I try and trim it up a bit so it, isn't supposed to be grass. I'm not trying to make it look like grass. I even put boulders there for size. But yeah, but that's the only technique I know is don't try and make grass look like grass because mechs are just way too big.
Yes.
Do you guys have any other other good?
Well, if you wanted to do, actually, I showed Mike a long time ago, and I was my Filt Velt guys were actually going to be on farm. So remember, I was going to have rows of crops of rows of like little bushes that had like berries on them and stuff like that.
Turnips,
yes. And decided not to do it because I just didn't have the heart to continue doing that. But there's different size flocking that you can use. There's really like powdery thin stuff, and you can use that for grass. That's perfect. Use the little bigger clumps or make your own little clumps to make the bushes and shrubs. Make sure you dry brush it to give it a little bit of definition, or throw some inks or shades on them just to give that little bit of transition, and you're good to go. It's something that took me a little longer on the BattleTech stuff, because when I first started, that was the first thing I did, because I like those little tufts. I love tufts, and you put one on, and you're like, well, actually, this would be like a 12-foot tall tuft. It's like, I can't think of many that were like this. So there is a company that makes, and I don't have it. If you guys remind me, it's upstairs. They make really, really short ones. They're like 1 or 2 millimeters, and they're tiny little tufts. And they would be like knee high to a Mechwarrior on our scale. So those are really good, and they have really good colors too. So you put 1 or 2 of those out there instead of the big giant ones, unless that's the atmosphere and you're able to tell, like, hey, it's an alien planet and all their plants are 30 feet tall. Or throw some trees in there. Go ahead, Mike. You're the base expert, man, so you can give them all kinds of ideas.
Most of the time for people, basing is an afterthought. It's like, I got to get it done. It's got to have it based and everything like that. It's funny though, because it actually can really add, I think. And I think in a world of like something like a BattleTech, you're talking about scaling, right? The static grass doesn't look right. I'm going to tell you, static grass doesn't look right on any scale. Okay. Because the only thing I ever use static grass for is I mix it in the texture paste to make it look like matted down grass. And I like maybe put it under a Blood Bowl player or something along those lines, or a Guild Ball player. But probably the best thing to think about is, first, when you're deciding on your environment, what do you want to include on it, right? So I would imagine most of your BattleTech bases are probably pretty flat. So you probably have a ton of people who use crackle paste, right? So everybody looks like they're in a desert and things along those lines.
Yeah, a lot of browns, a lot of greens, because the maps are brown and green.
A lot of browns, a lot of greens, right? And so kind of when I'm doing smaller scale stuff, and I've done figures that are as big as a penny. And so one of the things you try to do, like pair of scissors on a tuft, it works well like a little manicure scissors, and just keep cutting it down and cutting it down and cutting it down till it looks right. But I think, that's what the interesting aspect of the challenge. So I'm totally going to have to do, Dan's going to have to give me a mech. So I'm totally going to have to do like a display style mech now. I love new challenges. I want to do all, like everything from a Gundam to a train to an airplane. I want to do them all by the time I'm done with the hobby. But think about a few things. First, the focal point is the miniature, but what interesting can you add to the base? There's a constant running joke on gaming bases for like D&D and any other thing else. If it doesn't have a skull, it's not a base, right? Doesn't count. Even if you're doing a shiny Happy Lake display piece, if there's no skull, it doesn't count. So what are things? I think Dan missed a golden opportunity with those farmer mechs to use a little bit of like the Woodlands scenic. They have that coarse or the fine tufts that not tufts, but it's like shredded foam, and then taking a little bit of PVA and then drizzling ultra fine colored sand on it and then blowing it off, and then you've got something that looks something like realistic flowers that might be more into scale.
Ooh.
And so I
do have pictures of the demo where I did something on those lines.
Well, you made me bring you all this colored sand, and so I did, and yet here I'm left hanging. So,
do you want it back? It's a little vial. It's only this big.
No, it's all good.
It'll last you forever too.
It probably will.
Right. Right. And so it's interesting things like that. I once dealt, I kind of on the opposite side of it, I did a Reaper frost giant. And so in order to make it really look ridiculous, I built like these like 1 millimeter trees and like kind of put it all around it to kind of give the perception of how like stupid big he was. And so basically it was taking a toothpick, the end of a toothpick, and kind of dipping it in glue and sprinkling it with static grass and cutting it back and sprinkling it with static grass until I got something that kind of looked like a tree, like kind of like a pine tree. And then I kept not being able to figure out how to put it on the damn base because I'm like, every time I, but anyways, it just those kind of neat little things to think about. And the nice thing too is the smaller the scale like that, the less perfect it has to be. You're also now just giving off the appearance of it. And so that's kind of my, I guess, advice through experimentation. Don't use you just kind of use other things that like use the standard stuff, but at a smaller level or at a lesser level. The other thing I would say is herbal tea. Herbal tea has become one of the most, I'm totally a crutch on herbal tea for all scales. And basically what I do now, take herbal tea, put it in a mortar and pestle. And if you look at it, it looks like roots and things along those lines, and just kind of grind it up in a mortar and pestle until I get it to the scale I want, and then mix it in with some brown paint and super glue. And then you've got a forest floor. Whoa. Or you've got mud, you know what I mean? Like you've got really interesting mud. That's not just brown gritty stuff, like you have stuff that'll have things that might look like a downed tree in the context of Battletech.
Yeah, because like you said, like with your giant and everything, like mechs are big. Mechs are really big, but you can't always tell that. And often it's up to like the basing to be able to show the scale. The basing will make or break the scale of a mech. And I have no idea how to do that properly.
Well, what the other, like you could also have an opportunity to have fun with green stuff too, right? Think about just in context, like if you wanted to have your mech smashing a car, right? How hard would it be to make a shape like a car in general out of green stuff that's that small, right? You could get it close enough pretty quickly with you make a brick type shape and kind of push around a little bit and you got a car shape, and then you take your mech foot and kind of smash it on the top of it a bit, and there you go. You got a mech smashing a car.
Yeah, because I've got plenty of like urban bases, but none of them have cars on there, so I got to add a car into that, make it actually look really.
I can't remember what it was, either Instagram or Facebook or something, where someone was using the urban bases and they had street lights, and it really I've never seen that before. And I was like, wow, now you get a really good idea of how tall this thing is, because now you have this line of streetlights, or actually there's like one or two of them, but that's it. But you have an idea, and it puts a little bit more into that story other than it's a flat gray road. You don't even know if it's a road. You don't know if it's just a gray desert out there. You don't know what that is, but you put your medians in there, or you put little lines. I know we do a lot of the cork board, the cork base with the
I hate cork.
Yeah, but for urban camo, it's awesome. For urban bases, I think it's fantastic because it has just that right amount of texture to give that kind of concrete feel to it.
Yeah, but you can see cork a mile away.
I know, but
you can look at it and go, "That's cork."
Well, yeah. Is that why you gave me all the cork?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I don't use it anymore. Because so there's a lot of fun stuff you can do too. Dan, my therapy session would help as well in this situation. So what I do is I will roll out super Sculpey Firm, which is the hard stuff, and I'll roll it like super thin into like these sheets. Then I'll put it inside a Ziploc bag after it's baked and hardened and cooled, and then just take a hammer to it. And what you get is, as you keep hammering in it, you get all different shapes and sizes. So for Battletech, down at the bottom, all of your micro crumbs are down there is urban rubble for Battletech.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you put that like around the foot, so it looks like it's stomping through the street and just cracking all the pavement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Breaking up bits. I like it.
I don't know. Am I being too specific? I'm not sure if you wanted more
perfect.
general.
I mean, I have two crutches when it comes to basing. The first one is using other miniatures as bases.
Yes.
Nice.
Always looks great though. Like no one. Oh, you used money. I can see you just crumpled up dollar bills essentially.
Yeah, I got a salvage bag, Josh, just for that reason, because the Catalyst they came up with a bunch of like the failed bits, so they just put them in bags for $10 or whatever, and you just got a random assortment of heads, arms, torsos.
That's awesome.
And then, that way you can have a guy like stepping on the cockpit of another guy.
Or if you're a 3D printer, all your misprints, you could just chop them up.
100%. Yes.
Another idea too. I don't know if you guys know, the International Plastic Modelers Society. I'm not sure where you guys are based, but there's chapters all over the U.S. And one of the things that's uniform at their monthly meetings, they have a bits table. And that people just come and dump bits of all different shapes and sizes and stuff. I go to the meeting just like with a bag and I'm like, ooh, there's a missile I could use for something else. And ooh, there's a broken tire. And, like there's so many. I actually was able to put a figure together, like from like people kept bringing in. They were working on the same kits. And I was like, oh my God, these all fit together nicely. But that's where I get you get random tank tracks and things along those lines, etc. But just being creative with it is a lot of fun, because every time I go into like a Walmart or dollar store, I wind up buying wood sticks, like the wood crafting sticks. And so I've turned them into train tracks, wooden plank floors, signs, you kind of name it on multiple different scales. And so the only thing that's limiting you is you're blocking yourself, because it's all out there for you to do. And if you make a mistake, cover it with mud, cover it with texture paste, and problem solved, Or just, what you could do is pour them all on clear resin bases and be done.
Oh, no, don't do that.
Oh.
So my second thing I just need to touch on is Vallejo water texture, because that is probably been on more miniatures than I want to admit. And it looks great because just a little bit of texture, green stuff, just to like give it like shoreline or lake riverbed. And then I just, I don't even do grass flocking anymore. I just paint the grass on, because I have perfect control over what and where I want it to be. If I'm doing, flowers, just dry brush stipple. But most of the time it's like I'm painting like dark to light shades of blue, and then going over it with a wash to blend it, and then layering the Vallejo texture just kind of gives it a nice gloss, and that catches your eye. You go to the mech, then you go back down to the base, and you're constantly bouncing forth, so it normally looks better.
And you know what? Don't be afraid to use the base to point to the miniature. So one of the things that in a composition class I teach is we talk about lines and lines and shapes. And so you could do, like, if you were doing your shoreline, you could kind of do mini waves that all kind of point towards your mech. Or if you were going through, like you had a mech that was wrecking a city and was taking down power lines, the poles could all be pointing towards the mech. Things that kind of draw your eyes to, like, basically follow in lines towards where you want them to be. It's mind control.
Like, have the power line like hooked on his arm where he dragged through it, and the pole's actually being dragged behind him. That would be fantastic.
Yep. And there's something, and at the angle of the power, the power pole is all, of course, pointing towards him. And maybe if it was a urban theme where you had a couple of little cars, that cars would also be facing towards the mech. And so even if the back of the car was facing the viewer, the front of the car is where the person's going to look towards it. And guess where you are now? You're at the mech. So just kind of little like tricks like that can keep people focused. Little tiny stuff can keep, focused, and then throw something unusual in there too.
Like a skull.
Well, yeah, and there's exactly like a skull, or, that little grain of sand right there that on a BattleTech, that's a skull, right? So one of the artists that we had on recently did a massive zombie, diorama, and it's 407 miniatures.
Yeah.
But interlaced in there is a zombie Harry Potter, a zombie chicken suit, a zombie Elvis. All the colors on these are yellow. And so everything else is kind of this greenish gray zombie things, but in there, boom, little yellows kind of grab your eyes, you know what I mean? And guess what? That triangle, you look straight up from that triangle and there are the survivors.
Nice.
And so to me, that's just sorcery from there, like
it's the human brain. It can be tricked and pulled in any direction you want it to be.
Absolutely. And we and also we think about too how we read left to right. And so a lot of times we'll look at the miniature and we'll start at the left side of it and go across it, because that's just how we're trained to read our entire lives. So those are fun. Composition is a thing that's really a lot of fun to me. When I do a class, we actually do we examine how people look at internet pages. And so basically, if you were to study the eye movement on an internet page, it kind of looks like an F. Mm-hmm. And anywhere there's walls of text, there's nothing there. Like there's no eye movement on it, because you don't even need, in your peripheral vision, you're not going there because it's a wall of text. And so kind of the thing is, to me, it's like, don't let your base be your wall of text, right? You want to make something a little bit interesting, keep people there. It's not the focus of your miniature, but it can't hurt. You know what I mean?
I will do my bases first just because I enjoy that so much. And then I have to build or paint the miniature to meet the expectation of the base.
And the one thing for listeners, the number one mistake that we see in like competitions, like when we're judging competitions, is that you'll have a pristine, pretty miniature standing in a dusty, dirty environment. This
is not the problem with our current Discord followers, listeners, because they love putting mud and stuff all over these mechs. It's really nice.
But there is such thing as too much. Which I did that with a robot. I was like, I'm gonna weather the out of this thing, and boy did I. Now it looks like shit. That's okay. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good
with
him
the sixth pilot. He just falls down a lot, so it's mechs in the mud constantly.
Well, and it was a challenge too, because we're always constantly looking for contrast, and so we're constantly like pushing shadows darker and darker and pushing highlights lighter. But as it gets closer and closer to black, how do you really weather that with like using brown or chipping and stuff where you can actually see it without being on top of a miniature? It's kind of harder to do when you're like most of my weathering and stuff I do is freehand. And so it's a lot harder to weather like lines and chips and stuff on a red model that you've gotten all the way, your shadows are almost black. And so anything you paint over that black, guess what translucent red does? It turns to black, So it's just kind of like, damn it, I'm stuck,
That's literally why I have like dark black granite countertops, is so no one can see where I made all my spills and stuff.
Exactly. There you go. Exactly.
All right. So we've covered scale and basing and painting. I want to talk about like someone who comes from like Warhammer or Dungeons and Dragons. Now you're painting almost entirely exclusively inorganic, sharp angles, flat spaces. And what do you do to kind of like fill those? Because nothing looks worse than a giant flat same color panel.
You start getting into theory of painting. A mech is essentially a subassembly of rectangles. And when you go down to when you drill down into it, if you're going to do highlighting and shadowing of these rectangles, well, what direction does the light come from? And you start to build off of that. There are numerous videos online on how to do that. It's basic shapes. You have circles. Where's your light coming from? Where's it dissipating? Where your shadow is going to be on that. If you have a cylinder or a cone, it's just that I'm not going to say basic art because I still don't understand all of it. But as I look at BattleTech, I think it's pretty cool that a majority of them are going to be kind of blocky, which makes it a little bit easier. And then from there, you have to determine like, how do you want to modulate it? Do you want to, just make it very natural looking? How do you want to paint it? Are you doing every single little box or every plate and highlighting each and every one of those, or you just try brushing it? I mean, it's it's a big hunk of metal that's out in an environment. Dry brushing probably isn't that bad, especially if folks are doing any kind of weathering on it. You're not going to look for those super fine details unless you're wanting that to be your display piece or your I guess your force commander or something along those lines, or your centerpiece. Then you'll take a little bit more time to do it. Are you going to put your shadows in there? Where are you going to put your shadows? Put a little bit more time into some blending. Use some different decals or some colors to accent it. But I don't think you would really change a whole lot. You're going to use the exact same techniques using a Space Marine or a very organic creature to a mech. I don't think there's much of a difference between the techniques that you would use. I think it's just understanding how those shapes and lights interact. And I know that much, but I can't explain it because it just makes my brain implode. Mike understands it. Mike knows he can talk to us forever about that. So I'll let Mike talk to us about it.
I mean, there's not really much more to add to it than Dan. It's just every form of art, from sketching, illustration to painting canvases, is the breaking down of objects into shapes. And really, mechs are probably mostly, like you said, rectangles and cylinders, throwing a couple cones here and there, right? You're in good, and if you study the way light reflects off of those size of objects, then you're in pretty good shape as far as how to modulate. I just think Battletech offers because the scale is kind of on a smaller thing, I feel like you can have more of a kind of F it all, kind of go however you want. Because, I mean, I don't know, like, if you were to do a shade or on, let's say, the side of a tank, right? So the way light reflects off of that, typically your shadow is going to be closer to the bottom, right? And that you'll have a nice bright line down at the bottom where you're separating between panels and such. You can do that in the mech scale. It'll be a lot faster to do because it's smaller, but is that going to make the mech look interesting? I'm not 100% sure because I would say you would do it, but don't go as high because you'll start getting muddy, right? I feel like your scale, like at the 28 to 30, 28 and above, we're always talking about adding and bumping up contrast, increased contrast, right? You post something on Facebook and you want feedback, they say push contrast. And you're like, what the hell does that mean? And I think in your scale, like that, the contrast isn't as necessary. While it's important, it doesn't have to be obsessively important, right? Like things like you're probably going to be more interested in, can they pull off weathering at that scale? Can they, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really hard. Like a lot of times we use the rule of thirds when we're painting a figure, that we break down the figure into thirds. The highest highlights at the top and the lowest shadow is at the bottom, right? You can do that with a mech, but you're dealing with less real estate, right? And so I've been trying to think since Dan asked about, said we're going to be on, is there a value to doing what we call Zenenthal priming for mechs? Do you guys do that? Maybe it all depends on if you've got mad airbrush skills, which do not have them here. I do 80 to 90% of my work via brush, brush in hand. I'm not sure the value is there. You know what I mean? For Battletech. I mean, do you guys Zenenthal prime, or are you just straight up one color?
I definitely try to, because most of my factions that I paint are either yellow or white. So it definitely, I cut my teeth on yellow, and then I promoted myself to white. And I was like, man, I really do hate painting.
If you try to paint yellow over black, you're not going to like painting. No.
And here I am painting white, prime black, work up to white, and
Sure. And maybe it's this way too. Maybe it's a thought process of challenging, of trying different color primers. Like instead of like you're painting a yellow army, do a brown primer. Mm-hmm. And then
pink works really well as a primer for yellow.
I've heard that's this on their show.
Is that the Goobertown Hobbies?
That's a thing that's been out recently of really cool. Yellow is you end up with like pinks and the magenta, and then you like put a light ink over it or glaze with.
It's visually interesting.
It is, and it does work. But when we look, a lot of those are going to be a lot larger scale, and that normally wouldn't work if you had like that bright or that bright yellow at the top, and then the dude's like ankles and below is that like deep red orange color. Just doesn't quite, it doesn't fit. And actually, Mike, that made me really rethink, because I do try to synthol my my mechs because I like that transition. I usually do 3 colors just to give a little bit of depth. I'm going to be trying some different techniques, but if I wanted to go with a dark, you can't do the dark on the bottom because it makes it look like a Christmas tree, or that transition. There isn't enough space in a mech to give a proper transition. So your colors are just going to have to be closer together, just enough to bring out that, hey, this is lower. You're not getting as much light. This is higher because this is where the highlights or the light source is hitting. And it's something we think about. 40K, it's a little different in some of those larger figures, but when we do have something a little smaller, each of those little panels, they're pretty tiny. We're looking at like 1 or 2 millimeters a piece, and to have to shade each of those, it's not really worth it. So that's why I would go with thirds myself, where if I wanted to slather a layer of ink on top of it or a shade, at least it'd blend it together and at least get into the crevices and create at least a semi-natural lines.
I just thought of something that might help too. One of the things, if you prime black, has the World of Makeup brushes hit BattleTech yet?
Oh yeah, I've got my
Okay.
I got mine right here.
Dry brushing is becoming a popular technique because it's easy to do.
So one of the things, if you prime black, take a Vallejo pale sand, or something. Yeah, ice yellow might be a little too yellowy, or a bone color would also work as well. Do a super light dry brush and the direction that you want your light coming from, over a black primer, and you're going to see your details start to pop, and you'll see the angles of you know what I'm saying? Like, it'll start giving you an idea about how you want to necessarily treat something along those lines. And that's so that, and your listeners aren't going to be able to see this, but so I'm right now doing a 120 millimeter figure, and it's I hate metal paints. I think metal paints are crap. Every time somebody goes, this paint is amazing, I go, you're full of crap. It looks realistic. No, it doesn't, because it's tiny flakes of metal. It doesn't look like actual metal. I love dry brushing metals because I feel like it gives it a burnished look. And you can kind of control kind of streakiness and textures on the metal that actually kind of look realistic and might have been in a battle. And so, but yeah, each dry brushing to me, I have to admit, I'm using it more and more and more and more and more, even in competition and display pieces.
Yeah. The priming black and dry brushing at the beginning really shows you which of those flashing lines that you missed when you're putting that sucker together. They pop out immediately.
Well, you know what? That's kind of a good thing too, because then you can just take a little file.
Take care of it early.
Take care of it early. Don't do what I did in my first competition. And as I was handing in my diorama, and I saw on the bottom of the foot, the mounted figure, massive mold line that 6 months worth of work I missed the entire time. So
you get too zoned in, and you don't step back enough. Scaling, you were talking about scaling, like if you were to paint a tank and then paint a mech, how it would just be the same thing, smaller, but it wouldn't be. My current struggle with one of my factions that I'm painting for Smoke Jaguars, they have like a lot of Jaguar spots on them, and I find that if I try and do it like realistic camo, like the scale is so small, and camo is designed to break up the outline of the mech. Doing the arm's length thing, it just looks like a mess because it does its job. It breaks up its outline. You can't tell it's a mech. It doesn't look pretty. It blends into the background. So to do a good camo job on a mech, I'm finding it difficult to separate, to paint bad camo on the mech to make it look good, because good camo makes the mech look bad.
Have you tried doing like a digital camo pattern?
Well, I'm trying to copy like a one from one of the factions, and
this is the problem with trying to match 30-year-old art.
but the solution so far is to make the spots much bigger than they're supposed to be, which doesn't do a job of making it look like camo, but it's visually appealing. I just don't have the scale right for it to where
your artwork's out of scale too. Remember that. Right.
That's
so
true,
you're trying to match it to make it look like that in scale, but that artwork is, unless that's probably the biggest piece of paper I've ever seen in my life, what it's printed on, that's totally out of scale. You want it to pop on the tabletop, right? No, I rhymed. And so at some level, it's got to be out of scale to catch. Like, it's kind of scale compensation that. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you've probably got spotters, right? The spotter style paintbrushes, right?
I don't know.
Those are going to be your 15 to 20 zeros. Those are little teeny mini.
Yeah, I have. I use. I have not been using them, and I just got a few of them from. They had them at Michael's actually that were synthetic spotters. I got a 5/0 and a 2/0. And I think a 1, and they're actually short-haired, fine-tip brushes. So basically, like if you take a fancy-ass brush and snip the tip off of it, it's just the tip. There's not much of a belly on them.
Yeah, but well, you know what Mike said about the belly? They dry almost instantly. Because by the time you get it from here to here, it's dry, and you're like, oh crap, and you gotta dry it off, and then you have to put a new thing on. And
there's an easy solution to that.
I know, Mike. Why don't you tell them what that easy solution is?
I don't want to, because then we're going to ask us about things that are tools and tricks and tips and stuff, and I don't want to.
Then we'll wait until the tools. We'll explain. Well, I think the biggest problem is you're using a smoke jaguar, but
I got to look up all this lore now.
I know.
I hear that a lot, but someone's got to, because if you don't, who's they
don't even exist anymore, right? So,
or do they?
Or well, I don't know.
Or do they?
Well, I don't know. As a Wolverine guy, I mean, as
well, do Wolverines exist?
Maybe they somewhere. There might be some little tribe out there that exists.
Or really close. Yeah, there's a lot of lore. If you guys read the books, read the books. The Wolverines may be closer than you think.
They might.
When you really break it down, BattleTech is really sci-fi historical painting much more than something like Warhammer. Like Warhammer is like pick your primary color and your secondary color.
Well, I think we're going to get into that a little bit, and I have some thoughts on all that.
Well, according to some of the people who ran BattleTech early on, like in the early 90s, a lot of the famous battles are actually based on actual historical World War II battles. So there's a lot of influence there.
What? The Tirpitz Affair has some relevance? Come on. Anyways, but no, I wanted to bring this up as soon as you said dry brushing, because let's get to that iceberg, because I've been waiting for
let's go to the iceberg.
It made me cry when I looked at it. I did.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Everything I know is all level one. Go ahead, Josh. Take it away.
So you guys are saying dry brushing is is a valid technique and showpiece worthy technique, and yet it's the very first thing at the tip top of the iceberg.
Why does that matter where it is on the iceberg? If it's done well, it's done well. Crappy blending from glazing versus really good dry brushing. And you also have to think too now, the nature of dry brushing, even in the 6 years that I've been back in painting, is totally different, right? Like when I dry brushed when I was in high school, it was dusty looking. It was done with crappy craft paints, and half the time it's streaky because I didn't take enough paint off, and then the other time I'm sitting there whacking it for 35 minutes because no paint's going on. And yes, the pun was intended. But now, though, in the dawn of like things like makeup brushes and this is, I'm going to throw this out there too, because when we took the Roman's beginner class 3 or 4 years ago, he talked about thinning paints before dry brushing with them, and about how it actually makes dry brushing less dusty. And so now you have kind of you have that whole Artist Opus dampening pad thing where you dip it and keep kind of thinning the paints on it as you go, and so it blends out more. So yeah, I think that. And then I mean, Bohun, there's an artist on Patreon on Bohun who's won tons of awards, and that's his main technique is dry brushing. And so yeah, I just think about it. Things come in full circles. When I got back in 6 years ago, people still talked about airbrushing as cheating, right? Real artists don't airbrush. And now it's everybody and their brothers got 25 different airbrushes, Dan, in their house, you know.
Hey, if any of you Mechwarriors out there needs an airbrush, I have many that I have dropped and broken that you're more than welcome to have.
But
Mainly,
so yeah, don't confuse the levels of the iceberg as level of skill of painter or level of quality of product, right?
I think that's exactly what went through my brain to begin with. So I'm glad you said that because when you set it out like that, you know, my brain immediately says, "Oh, these are tiers. Top is the lowest level, bottom, you know, the bottom is the highest level. So I'm only good if I can get down to the deeper levels."
Wait, I'm only good if I can make my own paint? Come on.
Oh, dude, I don't know what Dan was smoking when he was talking about that. Nobody makes their own paint.
So hold on. First, I want Dan to explain what the iceberg is for our non-visual format.
So as Mike said before, he was a fan of horror, I guess, genre. I am too. I love horror movies. So I go online and you find stuff, you know, you're reading, and this iceberg popped up, like the different types of movies. And so what happens is this iceberg is when the very top of the iceberg is everything that you normally see. So when you think, the first thing you notice, like, hey, I'm going to go paint these miniatures, and you start to look for how to paint. The first things that pop up to you are dry brushing, using a wet palette, using glazes. Here's a layer here. But as you like, oh, okay, well, I see this thing called, you know, washes, but why am I using this wash? Oh, the next layer is, now you're creating a contrast. So the more you learn about your techniques, you go into deeper levels. And sometimes it's understanding, sometimes it's techniques, sometimes it's just like, oh, why in the world am I even doing this? Because it's absolutely worthless. But like making your own paints, the hardest thing you could probably do out there is to make your own paints. But is it really helping you out? Nah, mix it. You can mix your own paints, which is what, number 3 or something, number 2 or 3. But then, why even do that? Go buy your pre-made ones if you're going to be doing entire armies. Sometimes you have to mix your own, but that's mixing. You already have 2 different colors. You have your black and your white. Oh, you're going to make a little bit of gray or a dark gray or a light gray. So that was the idea of it. There's so many things that we see in the art world, but then as you get more into like, what else can I learn? What different techniques are there? You start getting deeper and deeper and deeper into it. So that was kind of the idea of it. And it's a giant iceberg, and it's kind of fun to see, you know, when you start looking at horror movies and you're like, wow, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like level 1. What's at number 5? And then you're like, average and traditional artist really wouldn't go that far because there's really no need. And a majority of all your techniques that you end up using are going to be the ones that are readily available and the ones you learn first. It's about perfecting them. You know, yeah, I can dry brush like Mike's example, dry brushing with a big heavy dry brush, you're not even using a dry brush, you're using a regular brush, and it's got a flimsy freaking brush tip, and you're trying to dry brush on it and it's slimy all over the place, and you're like, well, geez, this doesn't work. Look at that guy on the internet, his stuff came out pretty awesome. We progress a little bit more, we learn different techniques of dry brushing, how to actually properly use it. The first thing I saw when Adepticon, for the folks that know what Adepticon is the Artist Opus guy was having hands-on on how he does his dry brushing. And the first thing I said to myself was, damn it. I think I sent you a text, Mike. I was like, man, we really messed up by not going this year, because that is something I want to learn how to do. If I was able to learn how to dry brush like that dude, man, I would be in heaven. that is something I dry brush all the time. I want to know how he dry brushes. What really makes his so smooth? What is it that he's missing? I can't learn that because I can't touch my screen. It doesn't work. But that having a hands-on and I'm very tactile, I need to know, like, what does that paint feel like? What does the brush feel like? How damp is damp? We hear that a lot. How wet is wet? So, and I guess it depends on how you shake the brush and how you rub it and everything. Probably, So yeah. So in a giant nutshell, that doesn't make much sense. That's what the iceberg is.
The tactileness that you're talking about totally makes sense, because that's also, I think that's how a lot of people learn. How does that feel when he says just a little bit of this until it's damp? Exactly. What does that feel like to him?
Or the consistency of milk. Mike and I were in training, and each person was brought up to the palette to touch the paint to know what the consistency was. And we're like, oh, holy crap. Okay, we can leave now because we figured it out. Yeah. Life is magical now. We got it. But that was just one technique, one I guess, thickness of paint or whatever it was. And now we have to learn different ones, But it helps, That's just the only way you can do it. How wet is wet?
Yeah, and the iceberg in and of itself is it's all language, right? So glazing, feathering, layering, blending, wet blending, all that stuff is the same thing. It's all blending, right? It's just kind of a little bit nuances in how you do it. A filter is still layering, but it's just how much of it we put on. And that's just the process of learning and having fun. And honestly, it was a good chance to sit down and talk to Dev Sodagar from CK Studios, who's become a good friend, for a couple hours. And the stuff that was 4 hours of recording, almost down to 2.5 hour episode, something like that.
I think I fell asleep at the end some point. So the reason why we started on his paint thing is because there used to be a store in Northern Virginia that had pure pigments, and you can buy the pigments and you can mix your own paints because they had all the medians there also. And it was it was like, wow, this is the coolest thing in the whole world. Of course, you couldn't open up any of the boxes unless you had mask on and stuff. And not because of COVID, because that shit gets in your lungs, it kills you.
Raw umber.
Yeah.
Cadmium.
Cadmium.
Oh my God. So we're talking the real pigment.
Yeah, we're talking about like real pigments. Like it's a special box and it's like airtight, and you got to put gloves on to touch any of this stuff. And they give you
they had mummy brown, right?
They probably had real mummies in there too. So, and that was kind of like the joke. But my wife, she taught me about this stuff. She's like, oh yeah, this is how artists would do this. And it was just like, oh, that'd be kind of fun thing. Are there any artists that do miniature painting that make their own paints? No, it's not even, for, $500 for a freaking little tablespoon of blue when I can just go buy some Apple crate for 99 cents or whatever it is and paint that blue. Get some Davian out there, right?
You're obviously not dedicated enough to this then.
We're not trying hard enough.
We're not.
Sure.
We're not. Or using watercolors. Come on now. Just think about those.
I use watercolors.
On your painting?
Yes.
Okay. And
what else would he use it for?
Huh? I pointed that out in the episode. I use watercolors.
I told you I didn't listen to it, and I was probably asleep during that part.
Absolutely. I use watercolors for shading and also for some of the subtle blends and feathering.
And it works, and it's beautiful. I'm pretty sure. I mean, that's why you win all those awards. But still.
Awards.
For the watercolors, though, this is why, because I still will say that my wife is a better, she paints a better miniature. I paint a better tabletop miniature because she has more watercolor experience. So she's actually doing wet blending techniques. She taught me how to wet blend properly on a big model. I was like, normally I just paint and then I wash, and then I somehow do it in the middle. And she's like, no, they have to be wet. And then I'm like, oh, what? No.
Watercolorists have a huge advantage. So when it comes to blending and stuff, my wife does the same thing. She loves watercolors. And I'm just like, I don't get how you do that. How do you make that transition so sweet like that? I mean, that's awesome.
Well, they also a lot of times study things like verdaccio for painting skin colors and stuff, and starting with the green gray undertone, et cetera.
There's not a whole lot of skin in our game, so we don't have to worry about it.
That's true.
I will say,
except for that one Flashman that somebody on the Discord was painting.
The Flesh Man.
Yeah.
There's someone a long time ago paint a mech. What was it? Was it a Kodiak or something? And the whole thing was like blood drenched, like because he came from 40K, and so the whole thing was blood drenched. It's like, do you know how many people that is? That's like a company and a half of people.
Economy of scales.
Yeah, you might want to. It's like little specks, not blood drenched mech.
But yeah, so yes, I know the iceberg is a lie, but we're trying to push BattleTech players and painters down. It can be a little bit of a difficulty because someone can be comfortable and say they like. Would probably say to a layman BattleTech player, "Hey, I've mastered dry brushing," but in the entire scale of miniature painting, I have not. I'm finger painting still.
Well, we could probably talk about like different degrees of each of them. And again, Mike's example of the dry brushing, I hate to say that sometimes the equipment makes things better, but using an old brush that you clip off the tip of it so that you could have that bristle that's all popped out as your dry brush compared to makeup brushes, and using large particle pigments compared to fine particle pigments makes a huge difference. It really does.
There are some things you pay for what you get for. And I know there are amazing artists out there that use crappy dollar store brushes and they win awards. Well, that's them. For me, my painting improved when I increased the quality of the tools that I used. And when I increased the quality of the paint brushes, it made it easier to learn how to blend. Right. And so I don't know about y'all, but every time I've used a crappy synthetic brush, one of two things happens. Within 3 minutes, it looks either like buckwheat or it's got a hook at the end. Right. And like, well, I can't do a detail with that now either way. Or I guess if I had to paint up and under something, I have a nice little nifty hook at the end.
I was like, that's exactly what I'm using them for. Like, oh, now you get between armor panels.
Yeah. But see, I don't need 40 brushes with that same hook. Right. Like 2 or 3 of those having one and a couple of backups. Awesome. But, for me, I guess at some level, if I go out and spend every couple of months, I spend $15, $20 on 40 paintbrushes. By the end of the year, I'm paying more than the 2 good brushes that I take good care of. And you know what I'm saying? Like that's cost. It's cheaper to outlay for those couple of good brushes and cleaning them than necessarily buying, for brushes in bulk.
You could have bought the whole sable and, defer the sable.
We could just harvest out our own, and we could just start our own, like listening to dry paint brushes.
Is this not why we grow our beards long, so we can use them for brushes when we run out of money? Oh.
God, I heard somebody said that. I was reading a forum and they're like, I pull out a nose hair to paint the eyes.
I've heard that. I have heard the eyelash, the beard, and I'm like, the pupils and the top and the lensing. I was like, it's not worth it.
No.
Yeah, Josh saw me a couple weeks ago, so obviously I've since harvested mine.
Yeah, you've been painting
there.
You've been painting seriously.
That's right. Paint brushes made by real humans.
Oh. Yeah, a little bit. I'm not talking. You don't need to go buy the $30 Da Vinci masterpiece brushes, or honestly, even if they listen to this, sorry, Artists, your brushes are Rosemary and Company brushes that are $3 a piece if you buy them from Rosemary Company as opposed to yours in a wooden box.
Shots fired.
I don't know. I mean, you can get really good quality Rosemary and Company brushes for $3 a piece. That's not much more expensive than a good synthetic, which is kind of a redundant, an oxymoron, a good synthetic brush. Sorry,
I'm still using the same original brushes from years ago when I first got in, and synthetics. I'm like, cool, this is done after a project.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I just have to admit, hey, these aren't going to last the whole time. So I'm just going to wear them down. I'm not gonna treat them well. I'm just gonna trash them, and it's easier mentally to accept that when I start it.
Exactly. But yeah, definitely. The way I think you're going to start seeing more and more. There's crossovers that we're seeing, like the example. You talked about the whole Duncan Rhodes painting a BattleTech, right? He's kind of a gateway. So now we probably have people now seeing him paint other stuff. And it's funny because he paints at kind of a basic level, an introductory level for his videos, because they're designed to be introductory, get people hooked in. He takes them up a couple of levels. But he's a stellar painter. Like when he paints for himself personally, he's an amazing painter, like a rock star type painter.
And it looks different than the stuff that he had to produce for
his academy or for, and so we're all brought into this hobby, whether it's via Army Painter, P3, Games Workshop, with kind of the same mentality. You put a base coat on, you throw a shade, and then you go 2 highlights, because that is kind of the standard, was 3 colors up, right? That's what a tabletop miniature is. And so you only really technically need one. You need your base coat, your shade, and your highlight, and your tabletop ready. With some sand, throw some sand or baking soda on the base, blammo. You got a tuft, your game ready, right? And so those are kind of, to me, that's what the iceberg kind of is. It's a little bit kind of, your first one is free, right? Like, and you try to, like, the more you want to, like, you get hooked into the painting side, the more you invest. And I feel like that's going to start happening. I've seen some amazing BattleTech minis on Instagram. While I was prepping a little bit for this episode over the weekend, I was looking through some stuff. I know I don't remember the names of the painters, because it's been a crazy weekend with looking at stuff from, I don't know if you guys know, the Golden Demon was going on this weekend too. And so literally all weekend long, I've been inundated with pictures of miniatures of all different shapes and sizes. And so there are some badass BattleTech painters out there. And so I think that as people see more of their work, and do what kind of happened to me and see it in the display case and go, ooh, I want to do that. You're going to get more and more. It's going to be easier to pull people along into, hey, you know what? If you knew a little bit about color theory, your mechs are going to pop better. Or if you know a little bit more about color theory, you'll understand why that color scheme doesn't work and why people are running away from your table. Like, they're like, my eyes.
And that can be a very effective tactic.
Fair enough.
Painting a battle mech. Yeah.
It could be a strategy. Works both ways. So I think podcasts like your guys' podcast are on the right path for melding the two worlds together of painting and BattleTech.
I paint so I can play, and I play so I don't have to paint.
Nice. Yeah. I have to share a little side story. Last year, getting ready for ReaperCon, I had a piece that I did in a dollar store champagne glass, and it had a palm tree in the back. It was kind of a shipwreck thing, and the glass was broken, and the water was pouring out over the glass. I was kind of like, woohoo, look at me, I'm fancy. And I had some AK Interactive paper plants in there, and then I did my resin pour. And I waited to the last minute to do my resin pour because I haven't done a ton of them, and I was using ultraviolet resin. So it's a little bit different than I just doing a straight up pour. One of the ways you get rid of bubbles is by using a lighter. Dumb ass me forgot about the paper plants. And let me just say, they're flammable. They go up quickly. And they go away quickly. Like, literally, there was nothing. Like, they went whoosh and were gone, and just left black soot marks on the back of the champagne glass. Fortunately, I was able to recover. And that, I love that story because actually Reaper bought that from me at ReaperCon. And so it kind of turned out to be a cool little story for it. But I feel your pain on lighting stuff on fire. I do it way too often. But that's what kind of the hard thing is, right? I've watched people do the taking fire to the display plinths to kind of give it a charred look as well, and to kind of give it that. A lot of that stuff doesn't translate well to smaller scales.
It doesn't.
I see it work really well with larger scale Gundams and like armor modeling, like where you kind of take like the heat pen and kind of puncture the armor and stuff to give it a bullet wound. But as that scale goes, I would consider sticking to like using pigments and pigments and freehand, etc. I mean, and that freehand is kind of a dirty word, because if you paint anything on a flat surface or a blank surface, that's actually freehand. Whether you're covering it completely or whether or not you're drawing a lion's head, it's all freehand. And so once we kind of break that fear of freehand, I think things will get better. Now, that scale, I'm going to try when I get this figure from Dan. I'll see him in 2 weeks. He's going to pick out a mech for me, and I'm going to paint it as a challenge. And we'll see if I can add any freehand to it that actually looks legible. But I guess on the other side of it is that most of that, the real life stuff doesn't translate well. And miniature painting is all smoke and mirrors, no matter what scale you're at. And
yes.
So, pun intended.
But everyone has to set one on fire just to see.
I wish it was just one. I've had a few experiences with the heat gun. Yeah, my wife took my heat gun away from me. So, I've set a couple of bases on fire as well. So,
Glad I'm not alone. That's what I'm taking out of this conversation.
The only other thing I could think of, Denham, was maybe jeweling, like lenses. Like everyone wants to jewel a laser, everyone wants a lens, and that's one of those things that focal point of a mech.
I mean, I don't think it ever should be. Like it looks nice from a distance, but when you get up on it, to me, at least the ones I've seen, it just looks like a bullseye, like in there, like in the weapon.
Oh, are you talking about the new style where it's like blue on a top and then it's like orange? I like the way that looks
from a distance, though, right? Not like.
And I am not crapping on the creativity. It does look cool, but is it really like what a reflective glass would look like? So that's my only issue. I do like the 2-color because it's kind of like that thermal shielding kind of stuff that's going on. So I do like the dual color that way. But the 7 and the L, the ones in the corners, I understand it, but I just my reality check for unrealistic game goes into play, and then it kind of throws me off a little bit. But yes, I have tried many, many times, and maybe it's just me because I can't figure out how in the world they're able to do it on that scale, because some of those windshields are freaking tiny, like Space Marine eyeballs, and you're trying to like write up someone's like name in it. It's pretty freaking small. So it's just so maybe that's where my angst is with that. I just like my regular blending from a dark color to a light color for the light source. It kind of gives you a feel like, hey, this is a windshield. It might have that kind of thermal kind of color to it, the greenish, bluish color we see on fancy cars kind of thing.
It's all like what lore are you using to decide what that is made out of?
Yeah. And you interpret it like that, and that's how you paint it. I mean, some mechs are very, very enclosed, but there's an awful lot of art that shows that, hey, this is just glass.
Yeah, just glass.
The person is like, they're waving at you.
And then you got like the Battle Master where it's just 70 to 80% of it is all clear, whereas the Thunderbolt, it's just that one little tiny line.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? This is going to be totally random and has nothing to do with anything else, and I apologize, but I forgot. I meant to mention this before when you were talking about helping with just kind of color schemes and basic starting of painting. Prime your miniature black, put it under a light, turn off all the other lights in the room, and take a picture. And you'll see how light interacts. Like you put it directly under a lamp. Once it's black prime, because most primers, even though they say they're flat, have a little bit of a sheen to them. They're kind of satiny. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to get a good visual of a top-down view of what the lights are, how the lights are interacting with your mech.
That's fantastic. I love that.
And so that's a way to do it. If you want to go fancy, you could even, if you want something like, if you wanted to try doing non-metallic metal on it, do it with a gloss primer. And then do the picture off the gloss primer, because you're going to get like really super huge reflections. off of it. But that's just I apologize. It was in my head before, and I'm like, it just kind of spilled out now.
I'm glad you did.
Was there anything that you guys will want to talk about? I know. Do you want to do tools for the trade first, or whatever?
Mike has a tool for the trade that I really want to hear. The spot brushes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So and I got to give this is a props to where I learned it from, is the Vince Venturella's hobby cheating videos. And I had commented on something, and I was like, dude, my paint keeps drying. He's like, dip your brush in retarder medium, dip it next in a little bit of a Liquitex Flow Aid, and then grab a little bit of color and mix it. And you won't like, one of the issues we have with if you use retarder medium or what's called slow dry is it kind of thickens the paint, so it takes longer to dry. But if you're only using just a little bit of on the tip of your brush for that one paint application, it'll stop you from getting dry tip, and it'll allow you to kind of manipulate the paint a little bit easier. So if you're on a spotter brush, you can spot it in, clean it off a little bit, clean off your brush, and then you can kind of clean up around it with a clean brush too. So that's kind of I actually just went to Michael's on Friday and bought a new thing of retarder medium because I was out, because I use it almost every time I paint now, and especially if I'm doing I find that it helps decrease chalkiness of the lighter paints. So the higher the paint value of white, either using gloss varnish or something like a retarder medium, because it'll stick those pigments together, you'll get less and less chalky.
I like it. Good. Is that the same stuff that we use for like airbrushing, like mixing for airbrushing stuff, or is it a different, the retarder medium?
I have never used airbrush retarder medium. I know it exists. I use Vallejo makes it in the little tubes, in their little dropper bottles, but also all the artistic lines like Liquitex and Golden do. I will warn you, if you use Liquitex, it'll actually gloss up your paint really badly, because it does have a high gloss value, but Golden's is pretty flat. I've never used it through an airbrush. I am probably, you would call me a mediocre novice airbrusher.
Yeah. I just meant because that's the difference between me just going into the garage, digging through all my airbrush stuff, trying to see if I have any stuff that works, or just going and buying a new.
If you have a Vallejo airbrush flow improver,
yeah,
it's not quite the same effect because it's not as thick. Like, you'll know immediately the difference between a retarder. A retarder is going to make your paint look like oil paint. Got it. Because that's why, the viscosity of it's going to change. But flow improver will help. You will not get as long of time period. The other one is if you've got GW Lamy and medium, which I can't lie, I use that stuff. I don't know. I put Lamy and medium on my Lamy and medium. I love that stuff. I use that stuff all the time. I don't usually thin with water, so I use mediums or like Liquitex Flow Aid or something like that.
Cool. Good to know. Thank you.
Is that the only good thing we should be buying from GW, or are there paints for? Yeah,
it really. When we start, we can have a whole entire episode about paints. Some paints I just love from GW. Some paints I hate them. But I even tonight I was when I were talking about those yellows, I ended up going into my get rid of bag and pulled out 3 different GW paints because I was just like, oh, I forgot how much I really love this paint. And it works for me. Sometimes you just find a color in a paint that just happens to work, but it wouldn't work for any other manufacturer that had the exact same color. It's just, it's an unfortunate thing that we run into as painters.
And I paint by color, not brand. And so if I see a color I like, I'll buy it. I have to tell you, I am becoming more and more partial to the folk art pure pigments. I don't know if you've seen them they look like craft paints, but they actually are called pure pigments, and they're like $2 for 22 mil, like the big bottle of them. They're actually almost like heavy body acrylics, which are they're actually pretty nice. I'm like, wow, these actually work really well. But the other GW tool is the mold line remover. I don't know if you guys have ever had one or not, but I got to tell you, it works great on plastic, but it's amazing on resin. And I paint mostly resin figures right now. I love it. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I honestly, there's now other companies like Scale 75 and Green Stuff World. They both have them now too. So they're cheaper, but I got to give props to the GW one on that. But I'd say that good brushes, if anybody, like, I don't know, I feel bad if Game Envy listens to this episode, but don't waste your money on a fancy palette. I use a 50-cent tray I got at consignment sale, paper towels and parchment paper. So yeah, for my wet palette, I have a Red Grass Games palette, and I always throw the paper away and put parchment paper on it anyway. So then I go, holy crap, why does this sponge smell like a locker room? Even though I put pennies and other stuff in it to fight it, I'm like, you know what, paper towels. I go, always end back at the same place. And so other tools, get a color wheel. Having a color wheel handy, and not just on your computer screen, but I put mine on my wall. Just, it's good to see. You know what? There's a reason why most movie posters are teal and orange, because they're complementary colors. They work. They catch your eye, and they make you want to look at them. You know, and so just that. Those are kind of my main suggestions as far as tools go.
Cool, very cool.
Anything from you, Dan?
Mike usually just talks for me, but
I tell him what tools to use.
That's right.
You make him review them. Yeah.
Brushes are really, it's as bad as the iceberg. Because
wait, Dan, are you saying that painters should get some brushes?
They should. And
okay, all right.
And I'm talking about like bristle brushes, not just the air brushes, because that's a whole nother episode there. Brushes have different characteristics, and you can get a very high quality Raphael brush that costs a lot of money, and it might not be your style. It might not work the way that you want it to. So Mike likes his brushes to have a little bit more flex. I like mine very stiff because of the way that I paint. So we have different likes when it comes to brushes, even though all the brushes are fantastic. So when someone says, hey, go out there and buy the Artist Opus, or go buy Blick Masters whatevers, or go buy Da Vinci's or whatever, that's their own personal preference because they really enjoy those. If you got somebody in a store, or if you have a store that let you test the brushes, just give them a feel. They got to have that texture in it. Like I said, I like mine very firm when I do my painting because of the way that I do my painting. So I need to have that type of brush. And I have tons of brushes that I purchased when I heard they were good brushes, but they have a lot of flex. And so I can't use them. I find that that's very difficult to use those. I think that's one of the most important things. Find a brand of paint that you really like. You can't go wrong with buying a black and a white. I know that the white can get chalky and everything, but a black paint, just to know or to have a feel of how that paint acts. You have gel-based paints, you got acrylic-based paints, you got oils, you have different types of acrylics that are being used, different mediums that are being used with all these different manufacturers. So basically the same paints, but you might find that like one just doesn't work with you that well. Just give one a try. Instead of saying, oh, I got to buy the mega box of this one because everybody says it's cool. And then you find out that it doesn't really jive with you. And then you end up going and buying other things. Mike, it doesn't work as much because he goes by colors. I did that for the longest time also. But I found that the more colors that I have probably like 17 colors of yellow. But why? Why do I have that much? So for me, I'm trying to grow by limiting my palette. I need, if I want a yellow, I want to use a very specific yellow that comes from a set. So I'm going back to the sets when I said don't go to sets, but that limits I know how the paints interact. I know that I enjoy those paints. So I will buy a set of those and work with those until the next one comes out.
I was just going to say, I also know why you have a bunch of yellows is because finding a good yellow is worth its weight in gold.
Yes. Yes, it is. And browns and greens. It seems like I have every color of the rainbow because
Dan's been buying new sets and I've been on the other side I've been downsizing ever since I lost about somewhere between 70 to 100 paints on my way back from ReaperCon. I haven't replaced most of them.
I have a whole lot of Vallejos if you want them.
Nope.
Oh.
I'm good. I actually just threw away. I'm working on a Blood Bowl commission right now, and I just threw away 3 paints that I emptied doing this commission. I'm like, woohoo! I have in another paint line. I have the same exact color, so I'll just use that and keep going till till they're all gone. It's different with like in commission painting, because if this guy comes back to me, for more Blood Bowl players, I gotta have that same red. So, but there's a little tip and trick for everybody too. Paint commissions, force yourself to paint a lot, and you'll get better. I've noticed in the last year, my painting has actually skyrocketed because of how much I'm painting. Paint commissions. There you go.
Opposite advice. Don't do it. Don't do it for money. Don't do it for money.
No.
Oh no, I'm not doing it for money. I'm doing it for practice.
But no, I did it because I wanted to like branch on like, hey, I'm really yellow, white, gray, blue. Like these are my 3 schemes that I do for 12 different game systems. And it's like, if I do commissions, people are going to make me paint like Nurgly green or like Eldar purple clown. So it's like, yeah, now I can do the little diamonds and the Harlequin paint scheme, and it's like, wish I'd never learned how to do that, but I guess I'm good at it now.
Right. Well, it backfired on me too for a degree, because for the same guy, I've painted all of his Dungeons and Dragons miniatures, all of his X-Wing game, his Robotech game, and now finishing his Blood Bowl, which I don't know why he's got 29 Blood Bowl miniatures. I don't know why you never use that many in a game, but they're all red, white, and green because those are his high school colors.
Oh,
and I'm so sick of red, white, and green but I've gotten really fast at painting red, white, and green now. So, but honestly, more of it was a repetition thing. And I know there were a couple of really good, like in the Richmond area, Oscar Lars is an amazing painter. I don't know if you know who Oscar is. He's somebody definitely check out. But in his studio, when he has apprentices come on, that's the first thing. He's like, you're going to spend this year only painting armies. And the reason why is because you're going to get repetition, you're going to get practice, and things are going to get cleaner and cleaner, and you're going to paint faster and not worry about the stupid shit. And I'll tell you, when we took a painting class with a couple people that were his apprentices in this past October, they were good painters. They were good painters. Now, granted, one's cheating because he's a tattoo artist, but that's a little bit of cheating there. But repetition helps. Paint a lot.
Yeah, we all got those Kickstarter mechs, so yeah, just start painting them.
Yeah.
Oh hell, don't even do that. Dude, go cheaper. Reaper Bones is coming out, and like you spend $100, you get like 300 miniatures to practice on. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yes, BattleTech, I understand, but everybody should cross genres. Cross genres now.
You've painted Robotech miniatures. That's like a lawsuit away from BattleTech.
That's right. Yep, 100%.
Yes, but I wish I would have had to paint him in a Jetfire color scheme. And there we go. We got a double cross lawsuit.
Nice.
We're BattleTech suing one and Robotech suing Transformers. We got everybody in there now.
I did see someone do a very nice Phoenix Hawk LAM modeled after Jetfire. It was someone put some serious work into that. It looked beautiful.
We joke around about not doing the Bones Kickstarter, but when you paint a lot of one thing, sometimes you need a palette cleanse, and I totally believe in those. You got to just do something different. I have a couple of Space Marines that are on my table that when I get I'm tired of just that block of color, I can just start over. Okay, I know I'm going to do this Space Marine in this color. Now I can transition back to a different force pack or something like that I may be painting, or a different color scheme. It's just good, even if it's just one, just to get through it. Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you start to lose that hobby connect with it. It's is it a job? Is it a chore? It's not fun. I mean, we always want it to be fun. It's supposed to be a hobby, a stress reliever, something we have fun with. But when it comes, when it makes you stressful, that's not what we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I've always tried to paint at least 2 factions, just to have variety, just to have exactly that break from one army. I paint a lot of Krita. I don't want to paint red today, so now I'll paint my Smoke Jaguars.
Everyone always paints their Karita red. I'm like,
I have 2 other paint schemes for them. I'm just not done with the red ones yet.
I have to look up all this lore now. Now I'm curious. You guys have stoked my curiosity.
There's only like 37 years of it, so.
Yeah, it's not like.
Truthfully, it's going to be a Google image search. So that's where I'm going to start with and start getting my feet with.
Camo specs
I'll
online.
Start with camo specs.
What? Yeah.
Okay, I mean, but this is the thing. Do you choose the digital reference or the
I like
actual
the digital
miniature
reference. The digital ones look so cool. And it's definitely, it's kind of hard to how in the world did they make all those freaking lines? Because it's only like a hair cross. But I don't know. I like what Camo Specs does, and I like the compilation one, even though it's all electronic. I do like the colors, and it gives you, sometimes you have to have a reference, and we can go to a whole entire thing about references.
Yeah.
But it gives us, it gives you an idea of hey, it doesn't have to be a block yellow critter, or it doesn't have to be all red. It can be multiples of things. And then we start getting into the pirates, and we can get periphery and mercenaries and stuff like that.
If you're not painting rust and patchwork armor for those, are you doing it right?
I mean, the reality is the rabbit hole goes as deep as you want it to.
Yes, it does.
Oh, so was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about? And I know it's so deep. It's so deep.
It can get very deep. Well, some point we'll probably have you guys on the show, and we'll have a different take. Maybe we'll talk more BattleTech than painting when you guys come on, because that's
worst case. I talk about what the tabletop miniature, knowing the things are going to get abused, and you physically touching them against other people's models. It's like
gloss, and then matte. Then
I don't.
That's what I do.
I don't varnish at all.
What?
I don't varnish at all.
Really?
The mechs that I took to that tournament, the one second place for
Wow.
best painted, no varnish, metal.
I do
varnish.
I do exactly what Dan does. I
Oh
do
my
the gloss with the matte on top of it, and they're bulletproof.
Mike's shaking his head, but he's muted.
Boy, if we could have a real life mute, that would be awesome.
I didn't even do that at this time. Maybe I just because I was looking at Smoke Jaguar stuff.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, see the spots.
I do. Yeah, I do. I don't. Varnish ruins the paint job.
Oh, jeez, Mike.
Yes,
we're not talking
it
about
does.
That's not wrong.
Varnish takes away the last highlight.
And when I'm painting white and yellow, that last highlight.
Kind of important.
Okay, so
It is the whole thing I'm painting for. Everything else is just to get to the top highlight.
Yep.
I won't varnish the ones that I keep on the display shelf forever, but the ones that, like Josh says, I'm bumping up against other people on the table. Other people are picking them up, dropping them on the floor. I'm varnishing those. Every single one of them.
See, I've had no
metal.
luck with metal miniatures. When I used to paint the 40K Terminators, if I looked at them, they chipped. I'd spray testers on them, they'd chip. I spray enamel crap that comes in this like fogger type stuff, and they would still chip. So I'm like, I gave up. I'm like, first I'm gonna decrease the amount of metal miniatures I solve that problem. But yeah, no, just try not to touch them. But I drop stuff. I have broken 9 feathers on his back.
Oh, not the owl. No.
I broke both of the horns off his head.
Oh.
I've broken the staff. Let's not even get to the broken base yet.
Denham hasn't seen it, so I'm going to send him the pictures.
What are you doing to that thing, Mike? Are you like playing catch with your kids?
I know, like varnish isn't going to help that. Like dropping.
No, but my point is that varnish ain't going to protect shit from me.
From you, okay?
So here's an interesting. Josh, how long have you been playing?
Playing with metal models
Yeah.
I'm on year like 7.
Okay, so you notice the old school guys. The first thing we talked about was protection, because I've been playing since the 80s. Protect your figure so you don't mess them up and stuff.
I varnished them, and I was like, I don't like how it comes out.
Oh.
It's not. I will cool. I have to repaint minis every decade.
Yeah,
I accept that.
Josh has this thing about repainting his minis every battle if they've taken damage. So, like after every battle, so he's okay with painting them every time.
I can see that in a campaign. I think in a campaign that would be kind of fun. Like, hey, here's some battle damage, but
I host games, so I just don't have that kind of time.
Then again, I play once every 15 years at this point. So.
Right now, I play about 3 to 4 times a month. So,
oh my gosh, I wish we were that active. Actually, the guys in our area said, "Hey, we're doing a campaign in our house. We're not going to the stores anymore." We're like, "Oh crap, man." So I'm like, geez, okay. I mean, I don't mind it. It's cool. It's just, after
the third beer at somebody's house, it devolves into like the game just starts crawling.
It's like, how much did I salvage at a guy? Geez, I don't know.
It's like a weekend long risk game in college.
Oh man, I used to do this every 6 months. We'd do that.
Yeah. We used to. Now we were old school, old painted battle mechs. We put it out on the whole floor and just play until we just collapse.
Yep.
I guess people still do that nowadays, but a little old for that. Now it's just Alpha Strike. It would be done in like 20 minutes. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having us. It's really, I've learned a ton from you guys. Thank you.
Oh, no.
I know Mike's got a lot of deep diving to do, and I can't wait to talk his ears off in 2 weeks when we have to take that trip.
Where can our listeners find you guys if they want to learn more about making painting miniature art?
The easiest way to find us is we are actually on 245 different podcatchers. So anything from Apple to, this is why I pay $20 a month to upload an episode and they take care of it. And so supposedly everything from Amazon to that. And then we're also, we have a YouTube channel, which is just audio right now. So if you are a person that says, I refuse to listen to podcasts, and you must watch a YouTube video, then you can watch our logo for an hour while you listen to us. Instagram, Facebook, we're listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan. And then our favorite is Twitter. We are at Dry Listening.
But no, Dan, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. Just talking.
Yeah,
like I said, painting is, I didn't make the joke, but we talk about the iceberg. It really goes all the way down to the sea floor on how deep you want to go.
I didn't realize how big the BattleTech painting the interest was until we did that Discord, and the center channel is Hobby Progress, and just like that's all it is. Just so many mech painting, so many different ideas, things I wouldn't have even thought of, and I'm like, wow, people are really really into this. Like this is a topic that people want to know about. How many people who play BattleTech have never played a game, but they've got 400 painted minis?
Oh, I know quite a few people.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to throw this out there too. If you guys or any of your listeners want hobby tips, we'll talk to you about help with like give you critiques and things along those lines. Listening to paintdry@gmail.com. We would love to hear from people, and our door is always open. We believe that this is a community, regardless of whether you think trains, tanks, or BattleTech mechs, whatever. We're all in the same. We all have the same goal, which is to be better, braver, happier painters.
Thanks again, Mike and Dan. Can't wait to check you guys out on the next episode of Listening to Paint Dry. All right, I hope the Mech Bay paint team was listening today so they can finally make my mechs look as good as I imagine them. Check us out next time when we talk how to pick the right mech and the right variant when building a list. I'd like to thank all of our patrons for finger painting the mechs for our last deployment while we unclogged the sprayers. Without you guys, we wouldn't have macaroni art to hang on the cooling jackets. Check us out on Facebook at the Mech Day Podcast or send us an email at mechdaypodcast@gmail.com. See you guys on the battlefield.